Hey, I'm Kev, Mr. Cole, and welcome to Power Oversteer, the motorsport show less likely to take their teammate out on the last lap. What were you thinking, Ian, you pleb? Anyway, this episode isn't about how much of a crime scene the Ducati motorhome probably looks like in MotoGP, but about IndyCar and Indy Lights return to the Phoenix International Raceway last week. The two-day event with practice and qualifying on Friday meant teams and drivers couldn't afford to mess up. Also be starting from the back for Saturday's races. We definitely saw some of that, along with plenty of other highs and lows that we're going to cover in the weekend recap. Another round, another weekend that started off with a big bang. Less than 10 minutes into first practice, Takuma Sato went into the turn 2 wall as he lost the rear in turn 1 while trying out qualifying trim. He destroyed the rear of his car, which meant he missed the rest of the day, including qualifying. Joining Sato at the back of the grid for the race was James Hinchcliffe. The mayor of Hinch had an identical accident to Sato's past the half-hour mark of practice on, as he also tried out a qualifying setup, although he suffered from understeer while Sato had slight oversteer. It showed as the Canadian turned in early, clipping the yellow line and then hitting the turn 2 wall with a bit more of the left side of his car than Sato. His Smith Peterson Motorsports crew did a superb job to get the number 5 back out for the last few minutes of the day in second practice though. Fellow Honda runners Ryan Hunter-Reay and ElusiveKev also saw rear wing elements snap as Chevrolet dominated, fit in the top 10 in the first practice results just like in qualifying and the second/night practice. In the 2-lap shootout, aggregate qualifying can work and is normal for ovals in qualifying. Another Honda driver would suffer a heavy crash in turn 1. Second guy out, Carlos Munoz, lost the car immediately in the corner in his first green flag lap. His car hit the wall square on with the gearbox at the rear of the car. The Andretti Autosport driver slowly got out of the car as he had soft tissue damage to his knees, but he's back in the car for night practice. Grabbing pole was Penske's Helio Castro Neves with a new single lap track record on his first green flag lap of a 192.631 mile per hour lap and a new qualifying record of 192.324 miles per hour despite getting loose in the final turn on his second lap. He was the only driver to break the 192 mile per hour mark and was almost a whole mile per hour faster than his Brazilian buddy Tony Kanaan. Third was Juan Pablo Montoya with Charlie Kimball continuing the Penske Chip Ganassi pattern as he equalled his best oval qualifying from Fontana 2013. Rounding out the top 5 was Ed Combs ahead of Scott Dixon and Joseph Newgarden, who got loose in turn 1 but kept his foot in it and might have challenged for a front row without that wobble. Best rookie was the number 8 in 8th, Max Chilton. The Chip Ganassi driver impressively qualified ahead of 2 Penske's Will Power and Simon Pagenaud. Top Honda drivers were Andretti Autosport pair Marco Andretti and Ryan Hunter-Reay on the 6th row. The last driver to actually qualify was Graham Rahal in 19th as he got loose in turn 1 like Newgarden, but he cruised thereafter. After night practice finished Friday, the only on-track action left was the race on Saturday night, which started with the sun going down before turning into a blaze of speed under the lights. Being the ghost driver at the start was Ryan Hunter-Reay. He hung it around the outside in turn 1, gaining 5 places to move into 7th. That was the only change in the top half of the order. Further down, Bourdais climbed to 12th ahead of Andretti, while Rahal was up to 16th, and Munoz jumped to 19th ahead of the AJ Foyt pair, Sato and Hawksworth, with Hinchcliffe bringing up the rear. We saw 3 wide action into turn 1 on the second lap, but the race quickly calmed down after a few laps, as the only other move in the first 39 laps was Montoya getting past Kanaan for second on lap 23. Cashinevis had led all 39 laps up to this point until he suffered a flat right front tyre. He pitted and went 2 laps down, highlighting how much a green flag stop costs. Newgarden got past his team owner for 6th on lap 41 before the first caution came out on lap 50. Luca Fairpin, his first ever oval race, got passed by Cashinevis in turns 1 and 2, meaning he went up into the grey and spun. He didn't hit anything and got going a few laps later. The race restarted on lap 65 and saw Ryan Hunter-Reay making moves again as he got up to 4th ahead of Power. Other moves saw Combs up to 7th and Aleshko moved up a couple of places to 9th. Moving a couple of places in the opposite direction were Bourdais out the top 10 to 12th and Hawksworth to 20th. It was another stint with little passing apart from lap 80 when Charlie Kimball dropped back to 9th as he got loose after Aleshko dived down his inside in turns 3 and 4, forcing him wide. And just like the first stint, a Penske leading the race suffered a flat front right tyre. Pablo Montoya had inherited the lead from his teammate, but on lap 96 had the identical tyre failure. Firestone are testing the tyres for the cause, but are going with Penske's story of the cars running over debris causing it, rather than the suspicion of Penske's setup maybe coming into play. Whatever the cause, it cost Penske his 2 leading chances to win the race and gifted the race lead to their biggest rival, Chip Ganassi's Scott Dixon. After Carlos Munoz broke out the next caution on lap 120 as a mechanical issue caused him to go into the turns 3-4 wall, it was Dixon's teammate Kimball who caused the chaos on the next restart. The Californian kid dropped down the order at a rapid pace on lap 133, then chopped down on Joseph Newgarden in turn 1 on the next lap to bring out another caution. Newgarden had to pit for a damaged front wing, while Kimball did really well to keep his spinning car out of the wall, but did get a drive-through penalty for his transgression. The middle phase of the race saw another caution on lap 146 as Sebastian Bourdais visited the turns 3-4 wall as he got up into the grade trying to go round the outside of Montoya. Bourdais already had to pit during the previous caution period to fix his radio and now had to get his car checked over for damage. The race restarted on lap 153 with that man making moves again. Ryan Hunter-Reay got past Chilton for 5th in turns 1 and 2 despite a wriggle, which meant he was fighting off Graham Rahal in turns 3 and 4, but just kept his place in the top 5. Montoya got past Cashin Evans for 12th, and Connor Daly made up a couple of positions to 18th. Once again, the race settled down and had drivers showing more action on their radios than out on track, with Montoya and Rahal unhappy at blocking. The Rahal Manangan Racing driver had a look around the outside of Hunter-Reay in turns 3 and 4 on lap 180 and called his defending ridiculous. The 5th caution of the race fell on lap 196 as Ed Coulter got into the turns 3-4 wall. The veteran oval racer was trying to go down the inside of Will Power, but the Penske driver took his normal line, taking the L away from Coulter, so he went up the track. He looked to have recovered the car until Rahal came through on the low line in turn 4, which forced Coulter up high and into the magnetic wall. Under the caution, the final pit stops were made as Simon Pagenaud made up 3 places, moving him up to 2nd, while Power lost a couple due to locking up and hit his front left tyre away from the wheelman. The final restart on lap 209 saw Bourdais be the driver dropping back as Tony Kanaan got past him in close wheel-to-wheel fashion in turns 3 and 4. Then Newgarden got by on the next lap in the dogleg, with the American having to go below the yellow line. The Frenchman then lost out to Ryan Hunter-Reay on the next lap in turns 1 and 2, while Newgarden got blocked by Kanaan in the dogleg and towards turns 3 and 4. The race then settled down and saw only Tony Kanaan get past Rahal for 4th on lap 223, then Bourdais and Montoya get past Hunter-Reay on lap 240 as the Andretti Autosport driver lost the car in the middle of turns 3 and 4, hit the wall and dropped debris offline on the front stretch as the middle element of his right side wheel pod got damaged before the final caution fell on lap 248 due to Hunter-Reay's teammate Alexander Rossi hitting the turn 4 wall, meaning the race ended under caution. After leading for 155 laps, Scott Dixon grabbed his and Chip Ganassi Racing's first win in Phoenix. The reigning champion's 39th career victory ties him with Al Unser for 4th all time. Pagenaud grabbed his 2nd consecutive 2nd place finish and the championship lead. After having to miss the St. Pete race, Will Power started this season off with a solid run to a podium just ahead of the quick Tony Kanaan, who set the fastest lap on the lap at 215 with a speed of 186.403 miles per hour. Graham Rahal set a new record for the biggest improver in an IndyCar race at Phoenix as he moved up 14 places from 19th to 5th and was the top Honda finisher. Newgarden battled to 6th ahead of top rookie finisher the impressive Max Chilton. Bourdais somehow got 8th after the truck carrying his car caught fire on the way to the track on Wednesday, then being the only Chevrolet driver outside the top 10 in all sessions on Friday and having a couple of issues during the race. Montoya clawed up to 9th with Ryan Hunter-Reay only the 2nd Honda driver in the top 10. Cashin Evans was stuck in the midfield for the second half of the race and ended up 11th ahead of Kimball. Another disappointing day for Marco Andretti in 13th, while Rossi called over the line behind him. It was a sad end to a decent first oval race for the rookie as he was in the top 10 for a good part of it until he had to go to the back of the field on lap 208 for entering a closed pit. Sato was the first lap finisher in 15th after he went high in turn 1 on lap 162, which slowed him down for a few laps. Deley was 16th after getting screwed over by the second caution as he pitted on lap 118, meaning he lost a couple of laps and the American only regained one of them. Oleschkin finished 2 laps down in 17th after a strong first half of the race was also undone by the same badly timed pit stop before the second caution, then compounded by a spin whilst slowing down on the way into the pits on lap 203. Hinchcliffe was only 18th with Hawksworth 4 laps down in 19th after pitting with a few laps left, and Filippi was the last finisher 7 laps down in 20th. Compton on lap 195 and Muniz after he completed 116 laps were the only retirements of a caution-filled race. The championship sees Pagenaud lead on 83 points, 4 ahead of Dixon and 9 ahead of teammate Montoya. Hunter-Reay's 4th in the championship with 56 points, 2 ahead of Canaan and a further point ahead of Castro Neves. Rahal has jumped up to 7th on 44 points, 1 ahead of Oleschkin and Sato, with rookie Chilton rounding out the top 10 on 39 points. A pretty good weekend, right? Just don't tell the vocal minority what they chose not to see. Now it's time to hand out some green, yellow and red flags. Beginning with the green flag given for a great performance over both days in Phoenix, especially in the race. Man, there's quite a list I could have given this to. Scott Dixon for being seamless once again. Will Power for getting a podium after his weekend in St. Pete. Tony Kanaan for some fantastic pace, but it's just another race where the rub the green didn't quite work his way. Joseph Newgarden for battling to a top 10 finish. Sebastian Bourdais for coming back after so many struggles and getting a top 10 himself. And finally Juan Pablo Montoya for getting a top 10 after that tyre failure. However, the green flag goes to 4 drivers who were exceptional. Simon Pagenaud, Graham Rahal, Max Chilton and Mr. Restart himself, Ryan Hunter-Reay. You might be thinking, why Pagenaud? I mean, he really didn't stand out. However, he grabbed his best oval finish with 2nd place, which was enough for him to lead the championship for the first time in his career. It didn't need to be noticeable like St. Pete. The Frenchman stealthed his way to 2nd like Dixon did to the win. In fact, he didn't see the whole podium much during the race, yet they ended up at the front. For Pagenaud to do that alongside 2 champions, it shows a different driver from last season. His first year of Penske was tough. There were only a couple of podiums in Detroit and Mid-Ohio on his way to 11th in the championship, his worst finish as a full-time driver. It was a shock after 3 stellar years with the smaller Smith-Peterson Motorsports team, which he led to the top 5 every year as Honda's top driver. The switch to Penske saw a move to the biggest team on the grid, to Chevrolet Power, and no longer be knee man for a manufacturer. With all the changes and no team built around him now, we probably shouldn't have been so surprised that it took some time for it to click. However, this season, it has. St. Pete saw him start from pole and challenge for victory, but Phoenix was a very different story. While Neves and Montoya were battling at the top of the timesheets on Friday, Pagenaud was close with Power, hovering in the bottom half of the top 10. After starting 10th for the race, he dropped to 11th for most of the first stint. The pit stops allowed the 31-year-old to gain places that he was unable to do on the track, yet he only found himself hovering around 7th or 8th until the penultimate caution. A few drivers pitted before that caution, which meant Pagenaud would have jumped to 5th anyway if his pit crew weren't so efficient in the final stop. The brilliant stop from his crew saw him jump Power into 2nd, which he held until the end. Pagenaud's crew deserves lots of praise for their stops, which meant that number 22 jumped a number of places in them. However, Pagenaud deserves the green flag for never having the pace to challenge for the win, which may have helped Dixon in the last 5th of the race, but the Frenchman ended up as the best Penske finisher ahead of Power. Last year he would have found a way to fall backwards down the field, such as damaging his wing at the Indy 500 and scrape a top 10 finish. His best oval finish last year was 7th at Pocono. In Phoenix he smashed that and equalled his podium count from that difficult first year with Penske. Wherever he did over the off-season, he's come back looking like the man who challenged for the title in 2013. There's a long road to go this season, but Felix showed a driver ready to get that first championship win. A guy who came close to that last year was Graham Rahal, and he displayed all his abilities on the way to a brilliant top 5 finish. The American struggled on Friday like most of the Honda drivers, as a slight horsepower deficit was obvious to the Chevrolet units. Honda effectively using last year's specs before finally upgrading to the 2016 units at the Indy 500. At Phoenix, this allowed Chevrolet to take the top 10 in qualifying and 8 of the top 10 in the race. With this disadvantage, Rahal had to fight hard from 19th on the grid. He made up 4 places in the first 50 laps, he made another position up in the next stint and was stuck there until the second caution. He took advantage of other drivers getting caught out as he moved up into the top 10 and never dropped out of it in the second half of the race. The Rahal and driver battled to get into the top 5 with the likes of Max Chilton and Ryan Hunter-Reay until he jumped up to 4th in the final round of stops. Kanaan would get past, but 5th was probably the best Rahal could have done. The American showed some aggression on the restarts, patience in the stints, and battled through the field. I know he did find some time to complain on the radio about battling Ryan Hunter-Reay in the race and about fighting Chilton after the race. It was a performance that was reminiscent of last year, where the 27-year-old would drive the wheels off his car and was regularly top Honda driver, just like he was in Phoenix. Maybe last season wasn't a fluke. The top rookie throughout the 2 days in Phoenix was Max Chilton. The Chip Ganassi racing driver nicked at home right from first practice to the last lap of the race as he finished in the top 10 in every session. Meanwhile, his fellow rookies Alexander Rossi and Connor Deley didn't finish above 14th in any of those sessions. It's quite the contrast between the rookies, but Chilton is with Chevrolet power compared to the other two and has a history on short ovals. Last year, the Brit had departed F1 and joined Khan in the Indy Lights and the Nissan LMP1 program at Le Mans. They were interesting choices because while we do normally see drivers note to American sports cars, we don't normally see drivers move onto a couple of startup projects in 2 very different series featuring 2 incredibly different cars. Despite winning in GP2 and finishing 4th in the championship in 2012, he was a backmarker of Manon Russia in F1 and just didn't seem to have much respect. But he definitely earned that last year taking on these drives. While the Nissan program didn't get off the ground before it got shelved at the end of the year, Chilton mostly made his name in Indy Lights. He got a couple of podiums in the second races of Alabama and the Indy GP as he spent the first half of the year getting to grips with the series. After not starting the Freedom 100 at Indianapolis and missing Toronto due to his Le Mans commitments, he came alive in the second half of the season. A 6th in Milwaukee was followed by a dominant weekend in Iowa for Carlin, where Chilton beat championship challenging teammate Ed Jones to the pole and race win. In the same week, he lost his friend and former teammate Jules Bianchi. He ended the season with 3 more podiums and pole for both races in the season finale at Laguna Seca on his way to 5th in the championship. It was a strong end to the season that got him noticed by Chip Ganassi, but the thing to notice from those results is that the win came on a short oval and hence why this is a green flag and not a yellow flag. Chilton showed he was more than able on the short ovals at Indy Lights last year, and with Chevrolet being the better option in Phoenix, the 24-year-old took advantage of the fastest car, according to Rahal, a bit debatable, to record a superb 7th in the race. On the final restart, he actually was 5th, and though he quickly got overtaken by Kanaan and Newgarden after getting too close to Rahal and losing momentum. That's the one thing that was very noticeable from Chilton in the race, and perhaps why he didn't finish in the top 5. He did these sort of road course looks into corners to the likes of Aleshkin, Rahal and Andretti, despite not being close enough for a move. Chilton said after the race that there was some stupid driving, but some of it belonged to him. Making looks and using momentum will just cost time, and as the likes of Hunter-Reay, Rahal, Newgarden and Kanaan showed, you had to be more decisive and fully committed to make moves. Rahal responded to these comments, pointing out Chilton doing these half moves. I know he did call them dangerous, but it really wasn't compared to some of the other moves we saw in that race. But it's something the Englishman will have to learn to stop if he wants to keep his nose clean in future races and not end up like Ed Coulter during the Phoenix race. It's not often the driver who finishes 10th is the best driver of a race, but Ryan Hunter-Reay was outstanding, just as he had been on Friday. He was the top Honda driver in the practices, but was pipped to that honour in qualifying by his teammate Marco Andretti. From the start, Hunter-Reay put his stamp on the race with that start, leapfrogging him to 7th. He got up to a high of 3rd before the second caution set him back. Like a number of drivers, he pitted a couple of laps before it, so he dropped down to the edge of the top 10 as it cost guys much less track time pitting under the yellows. However, the Andretti Autosport driver clawed his way up to the top 5 with some more superb restarts and moves before he pitted just before the 5th caution of the race. He emerged on the edge of the top 10 once again and would have got 8th if his car didn't get loose with 10 laps to go. 10th wasn't the result Captain America deserved. Despite 2 massive setbacks, he battled as hard as I've ever seen him do in a car that shouldn't have been up there, fighting with the likes of Penske and Chip Ganassi. It is the 6th consecutive top 10 finish for him though, and the former series champion has started the season as Honda's best challenger to the Chevy domination. He's driving how I imagine Honda wanted him to do last season when Graham Rahal took on the top dog role, while Hunter-Reay and Andretti Autosport took some time to get going. This season they're on it right from the off, and it's good to see the 35-year-old back being super. He's the hero Honda deserves and needs right now. On to the yellow flag, handed out for a good or bad weekend, but we gotta be whoa. Calm down, it's only one weekend. Honestly, amount counts for this flag were the opposite of the green one. Honda could have gotten it once again for the exact opposite reasons of St. Pete, where in Phoenix they did badly, but we know they're going to improve and have upgrades later in the season. But I don't want to give these out in consecutive rounds to the same, team, driver company, etc. Therefore, I could think of only two candidates. So the yellow flag goes to the Phoenix Grand Prix and Smith-Peterson Motorsports. Firstly, the return to Phoenix International Raceway went really well. The 2 days were great to watch, with a decent IndyCar race to end the event. Many things went right. According to Phoenix International Raceway President Brian Seeger, I apologise for the terrible pronunciation, he said 20,000 people attended, much higher than their target of around 15,000. It might not sound a lot compared to the days of 50,000 plus crowds from 20 years ago, but it's an entirely different landscape now. The numbers were good for an oval apart from the 500, and is a solid number for Phoenix to maintain or build upon in the next few years. The venue and series were so happy with how it went that the talk is about when Phoenix will return next year. Not many ovals have had that in recent years. Now on to the yellow flag part. However how good the event was, there's lots to take away to improve on. IndyCar played it safe on the aero package, going with the high downforce configuration that was used in the February test. I'm not saying it was a mistake, but as Scott Dixon put it, it's tough coming back to tracks with packages that you don't really know what to do with. It's easy to drive from the back seat, man, and everybody has their 2 cents, but it needs to be looked at, and everybody's going to comment on it. But you can't go to a middle ground, you can't go halfway, you're going to have to go a big way. All of us are talking about it, is a topic. So yes, I can see some changes maybe in the future, but we have to do it as a group, and we'll have to do lots of testing to make sure it's a better product when we come back, and it works. Most of the moves in the races were during the restarts, with virtually no passing once it calmed down a few laps later. We did see drivers get runs, but getting alongside for a move was almost impossible during stints. The good thing is IndyCar can look at the data from February's test and the race, with more testing to come, have lots of data to help decide what to do for next year's race. While there are the usual calls for less downforce and more power, and I'm totally on board with that, there have also been suggestions that Firestone could produce tyres that might degrade more during stints to help facilitate passing. Sound familiar? Oh, so while I said the crowd was decent, it didn't look like it on TV, with the Foyt and Petty grandstands closed, as the venue only opened up the Bryan and Allison grandstands for the event. As Tony DiZeno, apologies for my terrible pronunciation of his name, of NBC Sports pointed out, the empty grandstands created a perception that IndyCar is a very small series. It reminded me of F1's run at Indy, where there would regularly be over 100,000 people in the stands, among the largest crowds for those seasons. But it looks small, due to the venue's capacity of about 250,000. Unfortunately, perception is everything, and this is very much an oval problem for IndyCar, as road and street courses can get away with these size crowds due to the more spread out nature of those circuits. Finally, there's the schedule. While Friday saw lots of action with 4 practice and 2 qualifying sessions between IndyCar and Indy Lights, there were only 2 sessions on the Saturday. The Indy Lights race at 1:30, then the IndyCar race at 6:15. With such a long break between action on Saturday, Phoenix might have to adjust the on-track activities to keep people better interested. Events in between the races don't make up for the lack of on-track action, and maybe bringing more of the Mazda Road to Indy gang could help fill the void next season. Overall, this year is a solid base for Phoenix and IndyCar to build upon, and I'm excited for the future of the event. Meanwhile, Smith-Peterson Motorsports had an event to mostly forget. It started going downhill almost immediately, with James Hinchcliffe going into the wall in first practice, wrecking his Friday run-in. Despite his crew getting him out for a few laps in second practice, he never got going in the race. Running at the back for the whole of it, 18th highlighted a round spent on the back foot. His teammate MacLeod didn't show much on Friday, but had some good pace in the first half of the race, enabling him to jump as high as 7th until that second caution. I'm not sure if fuel consumption was part of Honda's problems during the race, but he, along with some fellow comrades, pitted before the caution, losing him a lap as he dropped down to 16th. He never recovered from the setback in the second half of the race, as he ended up a position ahead of Hinch on the track in the 2-lap down club. It was an incredibly disappointing round for the team, but the reason this is a yellow flag is that both drivers are good at this oval driving business and will be stronger in future races. Aliskin showed he's lost none of the aggressiveness and fearlessness that adored him to many fans in his rookie year of 2014, along with that pace he showed in the first half of the race. HinchKev has a good record on ovals, particularly the short ones, so should feature strongly at the only other one on the schedule in Iowa. The real test for Hinch is if he still has the pace he showed at Indy during his Andretti years and will be fine at a track that so nearly claimed his life last year. I believe this was just a blip for Smith-Peterson. The bigger question is if this was for Honda as well. The upgraded engine better work at the Indy 500, or else there could be more sparks flying from the teams than off a dome skid. Finally, the red flag, which means you done fucked up, son. If I included Indy Lights in this, their pace car driver would have gotten this by a country mile. Leading the field round for an extra lap before the start, aka a miscommunication. Maybe. But once they pulled off before turn 3, they went too fast inside turns 3 and 4 and ended up back on the track just as these 160 mph plus single-seaters were about to rocket off for the start. That is unacceptable and clearly very dangerous. Fortunately for that person, these flags count for IndyCar for the time being, so the red flag goes to Charlie Kimball for another one of those races. The Californian kid seems to do this at least once every season. Last year in Mid-Ohio he was in the sand more times than a beach volleyball player. This season the Chip Ganassi driver started the season off with a few incidents. He spun off on the last lap in St. Pete with brake issues, dropping him to 10th. Then in Phoenix he got caught out twice. On lap 80, Aliskin got by in turns 3 and 4, forcing Kimball up high, which dropped the 31-year-old down to 9th. The move was borderline late, but he did leave the door open for the rapid Russian. It was an error, but not as bad as what happened on lap 134. Left behind on the previous lap's restart, Kimball tumbled down the order until he tried to shut the door on Newgarden in turn 1. Then he free-falled to the back as he spun round. There was some great control to keep the Chip Ganassi machine off the wall, but a drive-through penalty was Kimball's reward for his chop. Was his move a reaction not to Newgarden but the earlier incident with Aliskin? This time he tried to close the door but was a bit late with Newgarden more than alongside, and it just resulted in him damaging both of their races. While his fellow American recovered to 6th, Kimball ended up fighting Marco Andretti and just stayed ahead of him for 12th. What makes these incidents disappointing for Kimball is that he's shown some great pace and should have gotten better results in the 2 races so far. He was running in 7th when he spun in St. Pete and had got up to 5th in Phoenix before that poor restart. He also had his joint best qualifying on an oval matching his 4th at Fontana in 2013. There's no doubt in the speed in the number 83, but there could be more doubts raised by who is driving it if Kimball keeps this up. With IndyCar covered, it's time to move on to the Mazda Road to Indy feeder ladder, which was represented by the Indy Lights series in Phoenix. In 1986, the championship began round this tri-oval, and 30 years later, we saw another first-time winner. The third round of the Indy Lights season may not have been the most exciting, but it did bring about a long overdue result for one of the title contenders and kick-started quite a few seasons. On Friday, we saw action in second practice as Ed Jones did the save of the weekend in turn 4. The Brit, who tested on dirt in a non-winged sprint car at Prix in the week before practice, seemed to show off his new skills with a great tail whip before continuing on his way. Less fortunate was Zach Veach as he went into the turn 3-4 wall due to a cut tyre. The Bilardi driver had to miss qualifying due to the damage, so the most experienced oval racer in the field had to start at the back for the race. Starting at the front was Junkers' Carl Kaiser with a 167.872 mph average. Joining him on the front row was Carlins Jones. The second row was an all-Smith-Peterson affair with Urata ahead of Anderson. Felix Serrales rounded out the top 5 ahead of another Smith driver, Andre Negrão. There was a good qualifying for Zachary Cayman de Meadow in 7th, ahead of fellow rookies Dalton Kellett, Dean Stoneman and Neil Alberico. Scott Hargrove was the top healthy qualifier in 11th, with Shelby Blackstock, Felix Rosenquist, Juan Pedrohita and Heeman Choi, who replaced Scott Anderson at Smith-Peterson, the last qualifier, in 15th. At the start we saw Zach Veach possibly show Hunter-Reay the way for later as the 21-year-old went round the outside and made up 5 places to 11th. Other changes in the order saw Urata drop a couple of places to 5th, while his teammate MacLeod made a couple up to a 4th. Kellett also dropped a couple of places to 10th, while his teammate Stoneman and Carlin's Alberico jumped ahead of him. After Veach got alongside Kellett in turns 3 and 4 on lap 12 before getting past him in turn 1 on the next lap to get into the top 10, the race settled down with not many big gaps apart from Troy getting slightly dropped at the back. The Korean would bring out the only caution of the race on lap 34 when he lost the rear in turns 3 and 4 and spun on the exit at turn 4 with the leaders just behind him. The 30-year-old would be the only retirement of the race due to handling issues. The race restarted on lap 39 as in turn 1 we saw Pedrita getting past Blackstock for 12th and Stoneman getting past Serrades for 6th. The Englishman had already been making moves in his first ever oval race when on lap 31 he got past De Mello on the inside in turn 1. The Canadian almost lost the rear of the car as he got up into the grey, but managed to catch it a bit. He dropped to 10th. Serrades seemed to struggle to get going after the restart as he came under pressure from teammate Alberico, who tried to go past him on the high side in turn 1 on lap 41. The crafty Veach snuck past on the inside of the American No to get up into 8th. The top 6 then pulled away with a queue forming behind Serrades. In the queue, Kellett got past De Mello for 10th, but the last passing of the race came from Stoneman. The Andretti Autosport driver had hounded MacLeod for 5th since about the halfway mark of the 90-lap race. The Brit was clearly faster than the Brazilian, but couldn't find a way round. Attack after attack was swatted away until on lap 72 in turn 1, the ground got high and just about saved the car but lost his top 5 position. It was a much less eventful race for Kaiser at the front as he was never under any real threat from Jones as he took a flag-to-flag and long overdue victory. The 20-year-old also recorded the fastest lap to record the second perfect victory in a row in Indy Lights. For Jones, it was the result he needed to start his season after a disappointing weekend in St. Pete. The same could be said for Anderson, who just about held on from his teammate Urata, despite the Uruguayan having a look down the inside in turns 3 and 4 on the penultimate lap. The brilliant Stoneman earned his top 5 finish ahead of MacLeod and the disappointing Serrades. Veach did as well as he could have done, getting past half the field to 8th, with Alberico and Kellett rounding out the top 10. De Mello headed the Pelfrey boys of Pedrita and Hargrove, who was in his first oval race. The anonymous Blackstock and another oval debutant who found it tough, Rosenqvist, rounded out the finishers. After 3 rounds, Kaiser leads the championship on 81 points, 18 ahead of Serrades. Rosenqvist is third on 53 points as, thanks to their podiums, Ed Jones and RC Anderson leapt up the order to 4th and 5th with 50 and 48 points respectively. There's a set of rookies next with MacLeod leading the way on 47 points, then Urata a point behind, then Stoneman a further point back. Veach is 9th on 42 points as another rookie, Scott Hargrove, competes the top 10 with 40 points. In the team championship, Carlin continues to lead the way with 68 points, ahead of Smith Pizza Motorsports on 61 and Junkers Racing with 59. Bilardi Auto Racing dropped to 4th on 53 points, with Andretti Autosport leapfrogging Team Belfry by a point, 30 to 29. Indy Lights will be back along with Pro Mazda and US F2000 at Barber Motorsports Park for rounds 4 and 5 of the season, as the Mazda Road to Indy gives the Long Beach a miss this year for the first time since 2008. Not a bad return to Phoenix, wasn't it? A fantastic job from all involved to provide a great couple of days, and there's lots to build on and improve upon for next year for the venue and series. I really hope this is the start of a successful remarriage between Phoenix and IndyCar. After another couple of ovals were lost this year, it's important that IndyCar shows it can support ovals and will give them a chance to flourish, unlike what it did with Fontana and Milwaukee. But I'll be back next week with my preview of Long Beach, as those famous California streets will be a bit noisier than they were this past weekend when Formula E were around them. So sign up for watching, and I will see you next time.